Greetings, and welcome to the Emotional Alignment Insight series. This video is going to talk about narcissism, and we're going to give you a whole new way of looking at what that label really means. To do that, we're going to start with our own unique definition and really kind of talk about what the consensus of that label is in our modern society. After that, we're going to give you some high-level strategies, and these are things to keep in your head as you're dealing with a person who might be a narcissist. And finally, we're going to give you 4 specific tips so you can deal with a person who might be a narcissist or really any difficult person. So let's get on with that. Welcome to Narcissism Redefined. Before we talk about how to handle a narcissist, we need to first determine what a narcissist is, and that's kind of difficult by itself. After all, there is no concrete definition, and most people tend to define it in their own way. Now, there is such a thing called narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD. And that's his group of like 8 or 9 traits, and at least 5 of them have to be present. However, in order to arrive at that diagnosis, you need to be a professional. I'm not one, and you're probably not one either. Here's where we need to do an honesty check. I'm going to bet that when most people use the term narcissist, they're not looking at these group of 8 or 9 traits and saying that 5 of them are present. What they're saying is that this person is really difficult, I'm having a problem with them, and as a result, I'm going to use some derogatory term. In reality, that's not good for you any more than it is good for the other person. It's not good for you because really, it's kind of a way of being abusive. To label someone with a term where they can't respond to it, that's kind of saying, this is reality, you're a bad person, and I'm not going to let you talk to it. And at the same time, it's not helpful to them because they don't know kind of what's going on. You know, if you are accusing them of being a narcissist, which of those 5 traits are you saying they're guilty of? So here's what we suggest. Don't use the label, talk about specifics. And that's going to be really helpful to them and to you. If they're lacking in empathy or they're acting really self-involved, you can let them know exactly what they're doing, and that will mean something to them. And also might potentially resolve the conflict between you and them. Before I get to the strategies, I want to mention my website, emotionalalignment.com. It's a self-help mental health website, but it really includes a whole kind of like behavior management system so you can affect change in your life. And I cover the core flow chart there, and that's a step-by-step process that you can use to resolve the conflict, internal and or with other people, that you experience in your life. All right, let's get to the strategies. Strategies are these high-level concepts that you want to keep in the back of your mind as you're interacting with someone to help guide your decision-making. Number 1 is free will. And it basically means we all want to decide what we do. We don't want to be told what to do. I don't want to be told what to do. I don't think you want to be told what to do either. And that's really important in this situation. Because if someone is behaving poorly, you can't behave poorly in response, right? We can't use abuse to justify abuse. And here's a great thing. When you kind of follow that concept, that changes the whole dynamic of the situation, right? It will stop it from escalating. And it promotes collaboration instead of confrontation. And that's going to be really helpful to you. Whereas number 1 says we can't control others, number 2 says we can't control ourselves. And that's really important because it will empower us. When we're in interactions, we can often look at them as being these passive things that we're kind of attending. In reality, even if the other person had this superior position, we can still influence where that conversation, where that interaction goes. So what that means is that if it's getting out of control, we still have the ability to de-escalate the situation. So no matter what, even if it's a bad situation, we can help resolve the conflict. Building upon number 2, number 3 says you always have the right to tap out. Now in some cases, that may actually mean leaving their presence and leaving the situation. In other cases, that may just mean no longer responding. But still, nonetheless, you are deciding what to do. You never have to talk, even if you're with law enforcement. Now granted, you might be arrested in that type of situation. However, at that point, you are stopping the fight and you are stopping it from escalating and hopefully protecting yourself as a result. Building upon the other strategies and tying them together is number 4. All interactions are consensual. That means that a conversation is a mutually beneficial exchange of information. And that's really important because it gives you the ability to determine, oh, I want to exit because this is not working out for me. Or also that it says, I have the ability to influence what's going on. I don't just have to sit here and let this other person talk at me or do what they say. Before I get to the tips, I'm going to give you a quick example to give you some insight into what I'm talking about. Let's say someone is interacting with me and they have raised their voice. I'm not going to say, stop yelling at me. What I will say is that if you keep talking to me like that, I'm going to leave this conversation. Or if this is a situation where I can't do that, I'm going to say, because you are interacting with me in an abusive manner, I'm not going to respond further. And I'll just sit there stone-faced and look at them. So you can see how when a person is not behaving the way that you should, you have the ability to both put them on notice and control the situation so that you're no longer enabling their bad behavior. All right, let's get to those tips. So strategies are these high-level concepts that we keep in our mind to help determine how we behave in a situation. Here are some tips that give you specific information how to handle a person who's a narcissist or really any difficult person. Here's number one. Tip number one is driven by self-affirmation, and it underscores the concept of 100% of what someone says and does tells you something about them, and may or may not say anything about you. And this is really important when you think about where does a narcissist come from. I can guarantee you that their childhood was not a pretty picture. As a result, they have a pretty warped sense of what the world is, meaning that they don't necessarily perceive reality accurately. And they also really don't know what are the rules of relationships and how do I interact with other people, how do I consider them. All that stuff is skewed. As a result, everything that comes out of their mouth, you should be thinking, does this make sense at all? Is this even remotely true? So for tip number one, this means that every single thing that comes out of a narcissist's mouth, you should be questioning and challenging and not accepting as fact. Your responses should be, I don't see it that way. I don't agree with that. I think you're wrong. That's not reality. I don't think that is true. Whatever it is, you should challenge them and almost never accept what they're saying as being the truth, especially if you feel otherwise. Tell them what you think. Tip number two is all about influencing the conversation. Just remember, they don't get to dictate what the rules are. You get to do that with them jointly. And if you don't like the way things are going, you get to negotiate. And to help you drive that, I tell people to don't respond to the comment, talk to the behavior. And that's really important because lots of times when we're in interactions, we kind of get this rhythm going and we don't even think about it and we just respond to what they say in a knee-jerk reaction. Maybe explaining ourselves, being defensive. And in that case, they actually have the advantage. And it's at this point in time that I tell people, wait, take a step back, don't react, observe. And that's really important because that gives you the ability to influence where the conversation goes. Maybe say something like, do you think it's okay to talk to someone like that? And if you think that's true, why don't you substantiate it? There's a whole bunch of things that you can come up with at that point to kind of knock them off the rhythm. And that's really important because at that point, you're starting to direct where the conversation is going. Remember, opposition fuels adrenaline. If you try to challenge their statements or defend or explain them, you're going to get this back and forth. If, however, you ask them to explain why they feel something, that's going to change the whole nature of the conversations. And while you do that, tell them how you feel. Don't use you statements. That's a really important thing that they teach you when using nonviolent communication. You don't have anything to prove, and your goal shouldn't be, I need to show them that they're right. Your goal should be, how do I make this interaction successful? Tip number 3 goes back to what I was saying before about giving them the details. If you think they are a narcissist, then look up narcissistic personality disorder. Look up the traits that define that. And if they're engaging in one of them, be specific about the one trait. Also, just do one at a time and do it when they are doing it. Like if you're going out, for example, and they're ignoring maybe your choices of restaurants or what your eating habits are, tell them that. Say, look, you're not including what I want to do here. You're only thinking about you. And that way you're giving them a specific complaint and also hopefully giving them an actionable request. And by that I mean is that when you have conflict with someone and you want to resolve it, and that's really an important issue, right? You have to give them a way to do that. Okay, so like if we're looking at a bunch of restaurants and they're not considering your options, say, look, I would like to have a vote in this. Are you going to give me that? That's all you need to do. Make it so that you both agree in a situation. One of the tough things about dealing with a difficult person, and certainly a narcissist, is that unfortunately we always have to take the higher road. Managing the conversation and how we interact with them is probably always going to be our responsibility. We can't stoop to their level, because if we do, then we say that this behavior is acceptable under some circumstances, and we never want to do that. Tip number 4 includes another honesty check. We have to ask ourselves, if we are interacting with a narcissist, why do we continue to do that? Because we don't have to. If they're a partner or we're married to them, we have to ask, why would we stay in a relationship with such a person when they behave in this manner? We deserve better. Are we looking for a scapegoat? Do we want something to complain about? Do we have some atrocious behavior that they're accepting and we have this kind of dysfunctional agreement going on? And if it's a friend, of course, those are always optional. Why would we have a narcissist as a friend? And even if it's someone at work, there are things that we can do to avoid that. I actually had a peer years ago who behaved in this atrocious manner. And I told my boss that I never want to interact with this person again. And they were able to allow that. So we have to ask ourselves why we do that. So tip number 4 is all about freedom of choice. You always have the ability to exit. You have the right to leave a conversation and maybe leaving its physical presence, or maybe stopping to interact in a conversation, or ending a relationship, whether that's personal or something at work. And in all cases, and this is a really important part, you should put the other person on notice. Even if you don't care about them or what they do, you need to help the next person. If they are in fact a narcissist, they're going to continually engage in this behavior. And if enough people say, hey, you're engaging in this behavior, I'm not going to tolerate it anymore, I'm not going to enable bad behavior, and I'm going to stop interacting with you and really stop our relationship, at some point that person will be isolated and their behavior will be questioned by them. The truth is, the best way to deal with a person who is a narcissist is not to treat them like a narcissist, but rather as a person who has this group of undesirable traits. If you want, look up what those traits are and see which of those traits this person engages in. And even then, only talk to that specific trait when they're doing it. Let them know what your complaint is, what you expect of them, and what you need them to do to maybe fix the situation, right? Be really specific. That's how you're going to help yourself. That's how you're going to help them. And if you're not willing to do that, then you need to walk away. Otherwise, you're enabling bad behavior, or you're engaging with a narcissist for some reason, and you need to ask yourself what that is. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you find it helpful. Don't forget I have a website, emotionalalignment.com, and there's a whole bunch of information there as to how to manage behavior, both of yours and that of others. And if you have any questions, please leave something in the comments, and I will definitely get back to you. Thank you.